to divide them so they don't all speak the same language, and that would a revolt. But then that's the point at which it becomes racialized, and it becomes part of this global capitalist system that's highly productive for Europe. I mean, the argument is made, and I think fully accepted, that it's out of the profits of the slave trade that you reinvested then in the Industrial Revolution, for example. So it's interesting, and you're bringing my attention that I should make more reference to that. There were these two systems, but what we're now looking at is the emergence, the economic emergence, dominance of the second system, the Atlantic system. I don't know if that addresses your issue at all. I'm being reminded of all the things I haven't done.
For now, do you have any comment, question? Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure how do I put this question because I listened to I'm not sure, historian or Jonathan Israel. His name is Jonathan Israel.
Radical Enlightenment.
Yes.
He studied Spinoza, and he recently wrote a paper about American religion. How did they accept or adapt the ideas of enlightenment? So Jefferson was supposed to be the one who accept the value of enlightenment, but Washington, he himself wasn't. I'm a bit confused when reading with you the paper. With the time itself, it's you mentioned also the French Revolution. Does it have? Could you tell more about the internal? Not conflict, but the internal disagreement of the Enlightenment, and how did it reflect on the issue on racism? Thank you.
I couldn't quite hear anything she said. How could the radical Enlightenment people compromise on?
Yeah, because you mentioned about this French Revolution. Actually, she talked about this age of revolution. Actually,
Yes.
backward and then forward to.
Yes.
But you also mentioned about the age of enlightenment. So she was asking how do you challenge or that actually not elaborate on the question, but the internal link between enlightenment, French Revolution, and the slavery or commodification of slavery or slave trade.
Well, I mean, this is one of the ironies and tragedies, is that this period that saw, I think, this really embrace of sort of a radical vision of equality and democratic governance. Flawed, of course, in many ways, but there was this embrace for the first time, the attack on absolute monarchies, the insistence that on the consent of the governed, and the equality, the unalienable rights of all people. This coexists with this huge growth in chattel slavery. And so the question is, how could people, live with it? How could they embrace both ideals? And I think it's a very torturous process. I mean, Jefferson has black children, but does he accept their real equality with him? I don't know. He trains them to be carpenters, not presidents. And he keeps them enslaved for a fair amount of their life. They're not emancipated at birth. Madison doesn't free his slaves. Washington frees all his slaves, but only at his death. Madison doesn't. He said, I can't afford to. Jefferson says, I can't afford to free my slaves because it would impoverish my heirs. And I think Ellen's point earlier that they also don't see the connection. I think that's a possibility, but I think they do see the connection, and I think they do suffer. I mean, I think they really do feel very tortured about these things because they're political enemies, the Federalists, in Britain, the evangelicals were very anti, Tom Paine, they're anti the French Revolution, and they're the ones who are saying, these are our brothers, pointing to the horrors of slavery. So they're not blind to what's going on, because it's just in their face all the time, and they're being challenged by conservatives about their own hypocrisy. So it's what I've been trying in all these lectures to do is to say this is how the torturous process, which is psychological, which is political and pragmatic, which is ideological. There are all these fault lines that slavery somehow or other falls through. And it's complicated. It's complicated and totally contradictory. It's not rational.
Want to follow up? But maybe the irony is in history and not in their psyche. They don't really struggle. It's the limit of their...
I think some of them struggled. I think Jefferson struggled.
I visited his house, Virginia, and his all these slaves' cabin, and also his mistresses who fled to France, but he didn't want to let her free, and also didn't want to make his children a free man. So.
I'm trying to be sympathetic.
No, I think
I'm trying to not
what
just
they
to say,
show in the writing of someone who proposed the ideal, but he practiced, or in his fiction, other poetic writings, there's very maybe unconscious, right? There's racist notes or tone would betray himself. So when you were asking, maybe we should pursue what we left out last time. That is why these people, their ideal were betrayed later on by the practice of all man is equal, or a citizen, all citizen has a right to have right. But then there's a practice of citizenship is an exclusionary. But the revolutionaries who earned this victory and they own their state, but they run it this way, right? But all the violence they took through this revolutionary process seems to be forgiven. But for the black or for other people, where they have uprising, they should be oppressed. So whose violence can be legitimized? And also whose decision of their citizenship could be legitimized? So this is a question, a lasting question, but it is also, I think it's the irony of this political movement and also the process of history. People are confined in their subjective position, either historically or politically. Yeah. But bringing up these pieces, I think itself foreground the irony, right? The black slave, how they lamented for their situation. It's exactly what happened to these black slaves. But you want to follow up with your question? Or
Yeah, because there was anecdotes about Hotel. He said among the discussion with the peers, like we could talk about enlightenment, but not in front of my servants.
we can talk about freedom, enlightenment, but not in front of our servants.
Said by Hotel. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's
Well, things are always being compromised. And I mean, I started to think about this whole project.
Voltaire.
他也讲过这个。
他听到好像是，他有讲过这个。
Voltaire.
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 Est-ce qu'il y a déjà parlé de ça?
Voltaire.
On peut parler des Lumières, mais pas des
French
Révolutionnaires.
ne pas ton
French.
serviteur.
Voltaire.
What I started to say is one of the first things that led me to think about this was my question of why is liberalism so easily and so frequently compromised? And I said there has to be four lines within liberalism itself that makes it cave in so much. And I started to think about this really around feminist issues. Why is it in the United States that it's so difficult to think about two things? One, women's right to reproductive rights to abortion, for example. This is still, a bitter struggle. And I think from an economic perspective, it doesn't make any sense. We don't need more children. We need women in the workforce. There really isn't, I think, an easy, logical reason to oppose abortion. But we do. It's bitterly fought over, and we're probably going to lose the right to it with this Supreme Court. And or at least on the federal level, it's going to be state by state that we can hopefully keep it. But the Supreme Court may say states can't keep abortion rights. So we may completely lose the right to abortion in the 21st century. I mean, it's crazy. So why is it, what is it within this argument? We have, we have a commitment to all men are created, And so I was trying to look at what is it within liberalism that makes it so difficult. And I decided, or the thing with affirmative action in the United States, it's, again, a perfectly logical thing that if you have exploited people for 600 years, you probably owe them something. You have to create a level playing field. And that we continue to have really incredible discrimination and segregation along educational lines and employment, etc. Now we have the whole trans movement. I'm fortunately going to die before I have to really deal with that too much. But it's very difficult to expand rights beyond which they have already been accepted. And within U.S. constitutional arguments, horrendous arguments, is something called the original intent. If you can't prove that the founders of the country in 1770 and 1789 thought about abortion, then you can't claim it. That it has to be, well, no, there's a wonderful woman, she's now doing a lot on Africa and South African constitution and stuff, Drusilla Cornell. Years ago, she wrote something called, a book called Imagined Domains, and she said that within liberalism, you have to, the focus is on sameness. You have equal protection before the law, but you can't, and I have had fights with this in, I think you were at that dinner party after that last talk I gave at Francois Ducos, and we were fighting with Lillian Condell, and she was saying, no, rights have to be the same. You can't have different rights. You can't say, well, women have have these needs and they should have special rights to deal with them. That, by becoming special, becomes privilege, it becomes exceptional, it becomes fragile and subject to attack. So this is how I got started on this whole project. What is it, this business about sameness, the business about citizenship, rights being tied to citizenship, but also rights being tied to sameness. And both are really anti-democratic visions. And how can we get around, within a liberal discourse, which is, I think, the only, one of the few that we have. That's why I like Bolivar so much, because he says no democracy, which is opening a door. But if we stick within the liberal discourse, which is the discourse in the United States, then you're stuck. And so these are all some of the issues that got me. I don't think this is an answer to your question. I apologize.
Do you have a comment? No?
Thank you.
Crystal, you have a question you want to ask? Maybe let's the student go through and then
Yes.
we can continue.
Absolutely.
Actually, it is also a question about Hong Kong situation. Yes, it's about their unequal force. Yes, because the topic today is about who has the right to have rights, and I would like to ask. How can we relate this topic to the Hong Kong situation and the police violence today? Yeah, how can we relate this topic to the situation? Yeah.
Well, I think this is where the discussion should really open up.
Yeah.
Because I think you all have many ideas about this.
Yeah.
I think the issue is, who has the right to violent resistance, or is violent resistance ever legitimate? Or is it politically unwise? Is it by becoming violent, did the students, pull the wrath of God, or at least of the administration, on their heads? Is this a good political pragmatic move? I think that's one question. But the other question is basically, who has the right? I mean, there's a time when one wishes, Gandhi is fine, we had this discussion, but there's time when revolt is necessary. And so I think those are some of the issues. And there are always going to be people who are saying, well, we have to oppose you, or you've been too violent and therefore we can't support you. And I don't know, is that a cop-out? Is it? I don't know, but I'm Irish, and we've been fighting the British for about 600 or 700 years, and one of our greatest moments was when we blew up the yacht that Mountbatten was on. And so, that's my grandmother speaking. And so, I don't know, I'm probably not the right person to ask. Wisdom is not one of the things I do.
Maybe
You
can
can
I
say maybe
my point?
yeah.
Maybe as Hong
What
Kong.
do other
okay.
people think? What do we do? What can we do? What should have been done? What was wrong that was done in Hong Kong?
Maybe the only way we can do is to keep seeking the attention from the international. It's the only way or the only method that we can do.
At this point.
Yeah, apart from maybe using the violence on them.
Worldwide global outrage is usually not very effective, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We were outraged about many things.
Thank you.
Winnie, you want to? No?
祝老师。
just correspond to this, I think this issue, it's really mostly ambivalent. I mean, on one hand, every country, every state have its legal regulation on the proper rallies, protests, or something like that. 集会游行法规范 to define regulating this. But on the other hand, I think Albert Camus and Michel Foucault probably said him, but for sure when he reported the Iranian Revolution, said that it is inexplicable for people, to rise up or for rebellions. So rebellions, at this later sense, are not something as a political right. No, not they don't belong to right to rebel or something like that. So I think Hong Kong situation are really in this very profound ambivalence. Between the regulated forms of protesting and those rebellious which are beyond rights.
Was one of the arguments in the beginning, was one of the arguments that they had been promised perhaps special rights in negotiations with Great Britain, which may or may not have had the right to say I'm going to give you back to China, but with these restrictions, but that they wanted certain basic legal protections that probably were related to common law, etc. I mean, I don't know. All I know is what I read in the Times. But so that they were fighting for these, which are in some ways the basic principles of the democratic state: the rule of law, legal protections in terms of legal trials, etc., etc. To trial by jury, to trial by your peers, to be tried in the same jurisdiction that you committed the crime, etc. So if this was what they were fighting, and this is something we believe in for ourselves, then what does that say about where we should be supporting? And then whether or not they should be violent, then we're talking about technique, not principle. I don't know.
But they are not really trying the rebellion. They are appealing for several democratic principles and also rule of law, and rule by law. But the juridical procedure in Hong Kong is totally broken. I mean, the policemen, they can arrest people and can do this and that, and even their court, their interpretation according based on their constitution, and saying that the law banning the mass is illegal. But that was denied or objected by the China government. So they totally deny this one country, two system, and also allowing them to maintain their political autonomy. So that is very controversial. And also having this police force guarding or keeping those students from coming out. It's terrible. Right? They also threaten that we can't have this June 4th happen again. So
yes.
Why do they say that? Why do this Chinese government saying that they want to use violence? So they don't have wisdom. But that's the technique of the government. But the principle, the Hong Kong students or young people or other citizens, they are appealing for a more lawful society or democratic society. But now there seems to be no, yeah, right. Go ahead.
It's not about Hong Kong, but more generally about the language we use, about the language which is used in high-flying normative documents, constitutions, charters, declarations, etc. I will speak about the unalienable rights, which I think to many people sounds a bit abstract, as if rights existed independently of those who claim it. I believe historically rights are shaped when there are people claiming them. It's difficult to imagine a right independently. And it's just an anecdote. I remember I attended the session of the General Assembly of the UN when a delegate of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, read its speech. And he quoted, he wanted to quote a document emphasizing the unalienable rights of the Palestinian people, but with a slip of tongue, it became the unattainable rights of the Palestinian people, and that everybody understood very well, because they indeed proved to be kind of unattainable as many other rights.
I know it's late, but do you people over there want to say something? Comment? Question?
You might just give her a mic. Yes.
Thank you, Professor. My question is like, who has the right to have the right to this topic? So, in democratic societies, they have constitution, they have sovereign states and all things, and the constitution provide like equality for all. But if we see in the today's society, like if we, for example, if we see the refugee crisis, like they are denied by the government. So who is going to decide the right of these type of peoples, like government or the constitution? So what is your idea about this? That like two contradictory ideas.
I mean, when rights are denied, what do you do? Well, I think one of the things, if I understand your question, if rights are being denied, what is your recourse? And one of the things that was, and Ron, you in a sense, I think we're hinting at just now, that rights are, I think we're moving away from sort of a Lockean vision that there is this bundle of pre-existing rights that we can pick up and put in our backpacks. And that rather rights are what we create through struggle, and that they have to constantly advance or they will roll back. And so, and this is a very, very stirring vision, but what I was trying to ask on Monday was, what if you don't have any power at all? What do you do then? That you have to have some rights to create rights. So, okay, so the Hong Kong students' rights now, I think, are somewhat protected by the fact that the Chinese government doesn't want to have another Tiananmen Square incident because it's bad publicity for no other reason. And so that's a protection. That's a power they've been able to use. And you know, everyone's holding their breath. When will that patient give way and they'll be slaughtered? And so the limitation, I think, on Bolivar's vision is that you have to have something as the King Lear says, from nothing comes nothing. And so I don't know what the solution is to that. For instance, to these kids that are in cages on the Mexican border or are being sent